you guys, in this next video, this socialist professor tries to explain to Tucker Carlson why the top 1% should be taxed more. But Tucker does not let her get away with it. Check out how he handles her.
But why? But you're asking other people to give their money to the government. Why aren't you giving 70% of your income to the government? You could.
Well, I'm not on the top 1%, but I have no issue.
You don't need to be.
Well, that's the argument I'm making, right? That it's not about working class Americans or people like me who are upper income Americans. It's about really the wealthiest top 1%. Now,
but sure,
I have
but
no
hold
issue
on, wait, you're a college professor.
Taxes.
I'm not attacking you, by the way, at all.
I pay about 30%.
But
I know you're not.
Why not pay 70%? I don't understand. Like, what's holding you back? Why not lead by example?
Tucker, you know what's holding me back? If I knew how to do that, I would have no issue doing that. But the tax code is incredibly convoluted.
No, it's totally no. Trust me. Let me simplify it for you. Just write a check, pay your taxes, then figure out what you pay. 30%, you said. Just figure out what another 40% of your income would be, and just send it to the U.S. Treasury. Washington, D.C., no zip code required.
You know what I do, Tucker? You know what I do instead of that? Because we don't have a fair system of taxation, I write checks to nonprofits that are providing services that the government should be providing. So I write checks to Planned Parenthood. I write checks to nonprofits that provide a safety net for Americans. So it has the same effect.
I think you may be, but it doesn't actually. So why not pass a law requiring people to send money to charities that are more effective than the government is? I mean, so you're basically conceding.
That would be great too. As long as the 1%
is not the most efficient way to lift up the poor, then why won't you send it to the government then?
Tucker, I would say this train wreck of a Trump government is certainly not the best way to serve the poor, since they have no interest in serving the poor. But in general, I think government does a fine job providing the services
I'm just asking you to practice what you preach. Let me just ask you one other question here.
I do practice what I preach.
Well, you don't. You're telling other people to send their money to the government, and you're not. So, like,
I'm telling the top 1%. No, Tucker, don't put words in my mouth. I am telling the top 1%. I am saying the government needs to tax them fairly. If we're going to talk about taxation, I actually think I'm taxed pretty fairly. I choose to spend way more than the majority of my income on other people. I choose to do that. But we're not talking about me. We're talking about.
Of course, we're not talking about you. You don't want to do it.
We're talking about the top 1%.
It sounds awful.
Tucker, no, you don't get to do this. You don't get to lie. You don't get. No, Tucker, you don't get to put words in my mouth. We're talking about the top 1%.
Professor.
You're noting the obvious. I'm not on the top 1%. It's not about me.
They're the
this
ones
is not an argument about me.
But not you. Oh, it's not
yes,
about you. Okay, I get it.
Yes,
it's never about.
That's the argument.
People proposing it.
I love how this conversation went. It's obviously about her giving reasons as to why the top 1% should be taxed more. And Tucker is just calling her out on it and says, well, if you really feel that we should be giving more paid more taxes to the government, why don't you just do it? Like, he calls her out on it. And when she tries to tell him that she's talking about just the 1%, he's like, why the 1%? Like, if you really feel you should do it. So he's like, keeps holding her accountable. Why don't you write a check? And I loved his idea. Like, after you pay your 30% that you said you're paying to the IRS, why don't you just calculate what 40% more would be and give that more to the IRS, the government. But when she said, well, you know how she does it? Or how she goes, you know how I do it? I give a lot of my money to charity. All right. She doesn't even know what's going on here, but she just totally blew up her case because Tucker caught it when he said, what a great idea. Instead of taxing American people more, whether it's the 1%, middle class, whatever it is, why don't we give them the right to use their money and pay toward charities? Why does all of it have to go to the government? Why can't we, pay money towards charity as we already do, right? Because we know when government has our money, we don't have a say in how that money is spent. But if we're able to take more of our money or any of our money and choose what charity we want it to go to, we know that more good is being done in the areas that we support and value, and not letting government decide where our money goes. So Tucker was great, really just catching her, and as far as her trying to explain her point, where she was failing endlessly.